Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up Florida. Am I fired up? Yeah, after all, I just came back from Tampa watching Miami Hurricanes. My goodness, 50-15 over the South Florida Bulls. You know what's so interesting about that game, though? Covering the Hurricanes, the Bulls are my alma mater. So it was like there was no way I was going to lose, but obviously I was there covering the Canes, and it was a pretty close affair for the first half, 22-15. All of a sudden, Miami blew this thing open due to the play of Cam Ward. With that said, this is Fire Up Florida, and we obviously talk about hockey. We talk about local hockey in addition to the national scene as well. With that said, I want to welcome back Rod Peterson. Welcome back.
Nice to see you guys. Hey, George.
Is it Peterson? S-E-M?
S-E-N. It's Danish.
Well, yeah, well, if my eyes are that bad and it says M, then I need to get a new eye doctor. But Danish is one thing, right? So with that said, yeah, there you go. We'll turn it over to George. After all, Rod has volunteered to moderate for me in case I lose my voice.
All right.
Got to give my man from Canada a hard time. So I'm going to call him Rod Peterson, okay, with an M, okay, because that's his name for the night, because that's how he, I guess M and N are close in the alphabet. Just kidding with you. As they would say in the chat room, ball buster. Just kidding with you.
I've been called far worse, trust me.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, like you say, let that be the worst of your concerns. Well, we're glad to have both of you back on for another edition. So, Rob, we're going to turn the first segment over to you. I want to give us an update about the Panthers training camp insights. What do you got for us?
Well, you can read about it in the South Florida Tribune. When I write my column, it'll be published in the next 24 hours, I would say. But it was nice to be in the rink, American Bank Arena Sunday. Panthers played a doubleheader against the Nashville Predators. And it was believed, I mean, you guys have been here longer than me, lived here longer than me, but 8,076 were in the rink for the first game of the doubleheader on Sunday, believed to be a Panthers preseason record. And they were loud. And I've been going to Panthers preseason games for the last 4 seasons, and I expected maybe 1,500 in the crowd. There was 8,000 there to welcome the Panthers back for the first time since they won the Stanley Cup. And so there was a lot of buzz for that. The games were at 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock. Panthers won the first game 3-2. And then in the 6 o'clock game at night, Steven Stamkos made his debut for the Nashville Predators. And I was down near the glass getting pictures, you know, had it posted to the South Florida Tribune Instagram page. And
right.
It was odd seeing Steven Stamkos in blue and gold, blue and yellow versus blue and white of the Lightning. But in his debut, if you count preseason, he was 1 goal and -3 for the Predators, and the Panthers ended up winning that game 6-2. So,
we'll find out. I mean, listen, let's face it, this team here coming off the Stanley Cup, everybody got to hang out with the cup. Now it's time to get back to business, and Paul Maurice knows that. So with that George, you know, since Rod was there, 8,000 people showed up, and I can tell, I know why 8,000 showed up, because Candy and I were on the Sawgrass Expressway, I-75, coming back from Tampa, and I was paying attention to that parking lot. So, George, what are your thoughts about the fact that Rod went out there and not only covered it for us, but 8,000 for one of these thingamajobbers? Is something you want to add, Rod, before I turn over to George? Okay, so we'll turn over to George, okay?
Well, first and foremost, I have never heard of this before, Scott and Rod, NHL doubleheader. Have they done that before, either at Tampa or at Florida before? Because
they've done it here. They've done it here.
Yeah, the Red Wings. That's something very unfamiliar to me, because I never heard of one in Michigan.
No, Nashville and Florida do it, and they've done it here. I think just about every year. This is my fourth season covering the Panthers. Okay. But there's also split squads. You guys see that in baseball all the time.
Sure.
Tonight, the Flames and the Oilers are playing 2 games, one in Edmonton, one in Calgary, simultaneously. This, I think, was better. It was back-to-back in the same rink. And I really like that. I hope we continue to do it every year, and I think they will.
Yeah, so my other thought is that they actually emptied out the first group of attendant fans. I have.
Really?
Wow.
They emptied out the first group, and then they ended up. That's smart.
It worked really slick. As a matter of fact, I bought my ticket, and it was $22. And when I left after the first game, and I said, so what do I have to do for the second game? They said, just leave and come back in. Your ticket for the first
Oh,
game is
okay.
good for the second game. And so
Oh,
it worked really slick. There wasn't nearly as many people for the second game as the first. It was a 2:00 start on the Sunday afternoon. But like I say, and Scott said, the Stanley Cup champs are back. They flexed their muscle, man. They split their roster pretty evenly in terms of vets for the 2 games, but they completely dominated Nashville. It was not a good outing for the Predators.
okay.
All right, so
Okay.
Rod, Joshua Dore wants some clarity on this. So Candy, put that one up there with the one ticket was for both games. I'm pretty sure no. Okay, but
Yeah,
Rod, go ahead and clarify it, please.
I was there, dude. It was, you could buy one ticket. It was good for both games.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. I know you were there, but some people obviously want clarification, and that's exactly what you just provided. So, is there anything that you could probably add to that experience?
No, that was it. Like I said, I mean, listen, read the South Florida Tribune for my in-depth coverage and analysis of it, because I'm a goalie guy. I was a goalie. I was paying very close attention to that. But the Panthers were just flat out dominant. And to be honest, guys, it was the first day of school for Steven Stamkos with Nashville, or first day on the job. How much
Yeah.
work gets done on the first day? Not much. You know, he was
Well,
literally getting his feet wet.
yeah, it takes time and all that too. I want to ask one other question, Scott, of Rod. Was there a long line at the souvenir shops? Because every time the Red Wings would win a cup, or any team for that matter, I'm sure that the fans were really going crazy over buying some gear. Were they?
Yesterday, not as much. I made a
Oh,
couple laps around the concourse. I think everybody had bought up the gear. I think Scott can attest to, in South Florida, this region all summer, it wasn't hard to find Panthers Stanley
okay.
Cup gear. I think
Right.
most everybody has it by now. From the parade within a week of them winning the Stanley Cup to now, people have got their gear. That's
Okay. Okay.
my sense of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is they're going to clean up on concessions all year. Let's not kid ourselves, okay? They will definitely, and more power to them. I mean, listen, it's a historic event for the franchise. First time that they won a Stanley Cup in their history. Everybody's excited about it for a change, but then again, why not? Paul Maurice and Bill Zito were the masterminds, but putting this whole thing together. You know, obviously Andrew Brunette was a debatable choice after succeeding Joel Quenneville, but Zito opted to go with the veteran. We saw how that worked out. First year they managed to get in the playoff. The second year they carried over, and the rest is history. So now, obviously, you know they're going to sell a lot of concessions, and as we continue to do more of these shows, we're going to find out where they're headed. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're just trying to make sure that the Florida Panthers right now, we're giving them enough carryover publicity so that we find out what happens when it really counts.
Mm-hmm.
And you got a lot of interesting topics that I'll probably bring on next week's edition of Fire Up Florida that came from Volume 5. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and incorporate next week. Tonight, obviously, when you start something off like their first training camp together with all this, it's more important to focus on the generality of what you experience, and that's what we're driving for with this first show, with you being there.
For sure. I love Joshua's got the specific questions about what I saw. And I was all right. How did night look? That's all going to be in the column that I'm going to write and send to Candy tonight. I came out of there with a literal notebook of items. I mean, George, you guys have been doing this a long time. I used to carry around a notepad and pen. Now I put them in my phone for the most part when I got notes. But yesterday I had a notepad. I think people thought I was a scout, but there was a lot of cool stuff going on day one of the preseason.
Well,
I still have a notepad. Yeah. Go ahead, Scott.
Laugh at me if you want, but I got to tell you something. I was doing a show after the Kane game, and I connected with some buddies at a local show. What do you think happens to me? I leave my notepad there when I left, but thankfully it landed in their hands. All they got to do is mail it back to me. So I'll write my Canes and needless post story off of the mental notes that I have, and I have other sources to get it. But trust me, I didn't know if that was a senior moment or a Scott moment because I was riding off the energy of what was dealing with the whole night. So yeah, even though I made that stupid boneheaded mistake, I can promise you one thing: it will never happen again. You know why? because Candy's going to make sure of it.
Yeah, she's going to have to ask you, do you sure you have your notebook, Scott?
Let me
Yeah,
just say, how many pages did you write of notes from that game?
Luckily, only 3 or 4, but they were on those real certain. Not it wasn't a legal pen, mind you. Okay, it wasn't that. I do absorb a lot, so you can't get in my brain. That's only for the neurologist to do. Okay, and we still don't have any information about my MRIs to begin with, but we'll get it soon enough.
Yeah, all I'm saying is what I would do is have him take pictures of your notepad and text them to you. Voila.
Well, you know what? You just gave me an idea. If I ever be that stupid again, I'll take pictures of what I wrote in there to begin with. So you definitely contributed to the notebook portion of the broadcast. Good stuff, Mr. Peterson. So as we move on, anything else you want to add about the Panthers before we talk about Mr. Hockey?
No, not at all. Other than Tuesday night, the Lightning are home. They got Carolina in there on Tuesday night. So once it starts, guys, as you know, it goes fast. These NHL seasons, they're playing almost every second night. So we're in it, man. I couldn't be more happy.
Well, let me also point out a couple of things, too. When these start, the format of this broadcast will change a little bit because obviously we'll be focusing on games. But the one thing I refuse to do, and I'm too stubborn in my way, is I will continue to strive for feature story topics to begin with, because I feel in my mind that's going to be the thing that drives the show nationally, in addition to what you're doing locally with the Cats and Bolts format. So obviously the Panthers, since they're in our backyard, our priority. The Lightning will be when obviously something comes my direction. But I want to make sure that people out there listening for the first time and watching for the first time, that while the preferences are Panthers, I'm not losing sight of our national fans by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that that's where it should wind up. With that said, we'll transition over to the next topic. We had alluded to it a little bit last week about John Beliveau and Bernie Geoffrion, but we're going to go into more detail here. Examining the career of Mr. Hockey. The top show is titled, Does Anyone Remember Mr. Hockey? Well, you know what? I'll give you a lot of reasons to remember. Number one, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame with John Beliveau and Bernie Geoffrion. We all know that Gordie Howe has a hat trick called a goal, an assist, and a fight. Okay, I can only imagine if today's players could handle him. Probably not, but that'll be for another night. But as far as he's concerned, the guy had 1,767 games played. Get that, 1,767, 801 goals, 1,049 assists, 1,850 points played in 5 decades. It gets better than this, okay? 23 NHL All-Star Game appearances, 4 Stanley Cup. And if you really want to go down the line, find it out there. I just whet your appetite with these numbers. So with that said, okay, Rod, what are your thoughts about Mr. Hockey?
My thoughts are these. The first thing that popped into my mind is the all-time games played record, which fell 3 seasons ago when Patrick Marleau beat him of the San Jose Sharks. And the reason that came up to me is this summer I was in Saskatchewan before you and I had ever even talked, or I'd met George and Candy. I was emceeing the Saskatchewan Hockey Hall of Fame induction banquet, which Patrick Marleau went into. And I looked at that list of games played for the National Hockey League. The 2 names on top are Patrick Marleau and Gordie Howe, and they're both from Saskatchewan, which is where I'm from, which is a heck of a thing. I mean, the points, the goals, all those things you talked about, the All-Star nominations, they're all great. But I'll tell you what, when you talk about career games played, to me, that just says something else. They all say great things, but it talks durability, right? Guys, I don't know what it says, but to have the 2 being from Saskatchewan that played the most games in the NHL, Gordie said it, Patrick Marleau beat it. That's my thoughts on that.
Well, no, that's fair. By the way, for all those out there, Gordie Howe, by the way, will have a bridge opening up soon. Gordie Howe Bridge, which will connect Windsor and Detroit. Didn't know if you knew that one, Rod, but now you know. Well, the Gordie Howe Bridge, George, if anybody knows about Gordie Howe, is George Eichhorn. I can tell you, I've met Gordie a few times, and most unbelievable people that you've ever seen. And Rod, I'll give you some advice, okay? That book that you ended up, that changed from my possession to yours, there's a picture of Gordie Howe and I in there with my arm in a sling, and George was actually at that game at the Pontiac Silverdome. So I had one wing and dealing with a former Red Wing, pun intended. Okay. Go to the book, Mr. Peterson. Look it up. Gordie Howe is in there. Okay. But that's it. All right, Gordy, Mr. Detroit, whatever. What's your take
Yeah,
on that?
yeah. Well, geez, where do I start? I mean, the Howe
at the at
family,
the beginning is usually a good place, but
in the
go ahead.
beginning, God created Gordie Howe. No, in the beginning, of course, I was a fan. I wasn't in the media yet. So we had a very historic building called Olympia Stadium. And these guys won Stanley Cups. And we're talking about Gordy and Del Vecchio, Mahavlich for a while, Sid Abel, Ted Lindsay. I mean, there are so many great Red Wings, but Gordy was always number one in the hearts of Detroiters and number one in my heart as well. One of the things I went to, which is really a stretch here, but when is the last time you saw a president or a vice president go to a ceremony honoring an athlete, and yet Spiro Agnew represented President Richard Nixon, who was invited to Detroit when they said goodbye to Gordy. They had an elaborate ceremony on the ice at Olympia Stadium, and to see the vice president there of the United States, and I was fortunate enough to have tickets to the game. It was surreal to me. It was surreal, and I've seen that at other events as well when they honor guys. But this guy was so good that he retired supposedly from the Red Wings and hockey, and yet came back, as you guys know, to play with his sons and eventually end up in Hartford, right? And play for the Whalers after the Houston Aeros.
Right.
And it's just incredible because when you're sitting through that retirement ceremony and all the pageantry, you're thinking, God darn it, we wish he would have stayed a little longer. Well, he did stay longer, but not in Detroit, which is silly for the Red Wings, number one, because whatever happened between him and Bruce Norris or Lincoln Cavallari or whoever was running the Red Wings at that time was not good, because Gordy made the comment when he says, I'm a vice president for the team. It's like they threw me in a dark corner and they threw SHI on me. And you know what I mean? He felt like a
Right.
mushroom, he said. I got the mushroom treatment from the Red Wings, which is just horrible because he loved being a Red Wing. He loved the fans, but management screwed up. They gave him a job that was a stupid job. And he said, the heck with this. And I'm sure Colleen, his wife, had a lot to do with it. But anyways, those are a couple of my memories, Scott. Great guy, like you said, a great person to interview. Always joking with us in the in the media center or the press room. He was just a great guy to have around, even after he left hockey.
Yeah, my dealings with Gordie Howe have been nothing but pleasant. You know, I always regretted never getting a photo without Kaline, but I have also had to be careful that when you're covering an event, you cannot cross that line about taking photos with these people, and you have to be careful. If they catch you lose your credential. And will I ever put myself at risk? No way. I mean, let's face it, Rod. There's a fine line between ethics, right? Where you have to do your job because that's what we're there to do, and take photos. Now, if somebody's turning their head, well, it is what it is. But I'm not endorsing that behavior on this show by any stretch. Like, yeah, Gordie Howe is unbelievable, and I'll always wonder whether or not a lot of his records could have been broken had these today's hockey players played in the original six era. We're not going to comment on that tonight in an effort to stay on track, but that is a topic that we're going to focus on down the road. But I just wanted to celebrate Gordie Howe tonight, since we had an opportunity to celebrate Bernie Geoffrion and Jean Beliveau before. And we all know that with Gordie Howe's bridge, Rod, opening up pretty soon, okay, that it's a good opportunity for us to get the guy in there. So, and I'm going to tell you, for a lot of Panthers fans, I'll never forget when I had George Richards on the Motor City Mad Mouse show. Hey, he loves the Red Wings, George Richards, and he wasn't shy about showing his programs but in Detroit. So, but again, Gordie Howe is Gordie Howe, and I don't think a lot of his records would have been broken had there been more physicality in the game. That's subject for another night. But okay, with that said, so if we're talking about Gordie Howe, I don't think that there's a better way to transition to this topic. And then after this topic, we're going to have Candy give us a station break. And this guy here took a page out of the John Elway book. Okay, the retirement. And this was actually in Rod's column, by the way, on September 3rd. So if you have an opportunity to go to South Florida Tribune, Rod Peterson has his own separate drop-down box. You can see all of his stories because they're dynamite anyways. This guy is one of the finer writers, but I'll tell you what, his hockey stuff is definitely worth a read. But we're going to talk about one of the ones that he mentioned on September 3rd. The retirement of 36-year-old Kyle Okposo, the St. Paul, Minnesota product, was acquired by the Florida Panthers at last season's trade deadline from Buffalo and suited up for 17 Stanley Cup games, notching 2 assists. The hard-nosed player has appeared in 1,051 NHL games with 614 points. So I guess the main thing is, if you're going to go out there and take the John Elway way, meaning going out on top, Rod, tell me what you think, okay, in terms of Kyle's next move. Do you think he's coaching material? You think he's front off? Floor's yours.
You know, it's funny you asked that because he's in South Florida now. The keeper of the cup, Phil Pritchard, you guys know him.
Right.
The steward of the cup is here until October the 8th. And he was golfing this week with Kyle Okposo, Sam Reinhart, Matthew Tkachuk, and there was a fourth. And so Okposo announced his retirement, which is going in this week's column. He announced it within the past week. So as you say, he's going out a winner. I'm hoping to get an opportunity to interview him and ask him that, because I'm not sure that he knows what he's going to do.
Right.
And to be honest, I think he could still play. You mentioned 1,051 games. That's a lot, but there's guys that have played more. I'm not saying he doesn't want to play. He's retired for a reason, but he's here in South Florida. Doesn't sound like he's doing anything. It doesn't sound like he's going anywhere other than golfing. And let's be honest, guys, this is the greatest era to be a pro athlete, like a major league pro athlete. You didn't have to work. Right. So my guess, after a real long NHL career, he might not do anything for a year. That's the sense that I'm getting.
What do you think, George?
Well, I think that if he was very well liked by the organization, take a look at how many guys stick with the organization. And, again, I use Detroit only because of a reference point. A guy like Chris Draper, Yari Fisher, there's the Lidstrom is the vice president for the Red Wings now. Even though in the last segment we talked about Gordie Howe getting the mushroom treatment, obviously things are different now under the Ilitch family. But all I'm saying is there a way, Rod? I mean, you said he went out with a high, winning the Stanley Cup for the Panthers, but could there be possibly even somewhere in the system, either scouting or perhaps as an assistant coach with one of the minor league affiliates or something like that? I mean, do you think that he's got that much hockey in his blood that he would first of all want to continue with that? Because it is a grind too. It is a grind. You're being a scout or being a coach, Rod, they travel all over. Yeah. But that's what came to my mind. I mean, if he really likes the sport and he's going on a high note, I mean, Panthers or maybe even another team, but could there be some job for him in that line of work?
Well, it's a great question. A couple things come to mind with that. He didn't come to Florida until the trade deadline last year.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't here very long. I mean, he's a long-time Buffalo Sabre. Yeah, he did win, and he will be a hero forever in South Florida. You know how sports fans remember their heroes, right? But number two, Scott can back me up on this. The Panthers already have in their front office Brian McCabe, Sean Thornton, Roberto Luongo. They just hired Patrick Hornquist. They just hired another one last year. So it's like they can't hire everybody. So I don't know how many jobs are left, to be honest with you. So he wasn't around here real long, and I don't know how many jobs there are. I'm sure he could go scout for somebody, but I don't know if it would be with the Florida Panthers or not. But I can't let this go. You with your Detroit history,
right?
With Gordie Howe, a lot of those great Red Wings come from Saskatchewan. By the way, sorry to bring it up again, but Joey Koser comes to mind, and you guys remember Tiger Williams very well. He's not a Red Wing. Actually, I think he did play for Detroit for a brief period. But anyways,
I think he did for a short time.
Yeah.
Tiger Williams was known for his fights with Dan Maloney. What are you talking about? I remember this guy.
No, but I said to Tiger, who was the toughest fighter from Saskatchewan ever? And he said, Gordie Howe.
That doesn't surprise me.
So I just wanted to throw that in.
All right, so I'm going to throw something into you, Mr. Peterson, to help you next when you get your interview with him. Okay, you want to go out there and have a sales pitch, I'm going to help you right now. Okay, Some of this hurts me. It really does. But all you need to tell this guy is that Dan Marino gets every stupid commercial on the planet with the Dolphins, but I'm not done yet. Joe Rose is on TV, and if that isn't any good, you also have Bob Brzezinski actually opened up a bunch of restaurants here. So when you called Brews Room. So
and
if you
boat
want,
campers.
yeah, Kim Camper. I drew a name blank there, but thankfully you got it on here so that I didn't have to bother with pounding my concussion-ridden head. So I'm glad you're out. So there, if you want to go out there, I'm telling you, I've been in the business 44 years, which is probably 7 years difference from when you were kind of like a why, there's a few names out there, mention it. You don't have to. I don't want to take credit. I don't have a big enough ego where it matters to me. I'm just trying to get fuel for thought. So South Florida, they do take care of their people. No, if you don't believe me, Don Shula also you can put in that mix. How many commercials did this guy have on here as well?
Good steakhouses, Don Shula too. Yeah.
Don't I know? I used to go to them a lot, actually, in Tampa when I was coming to Buccaneers. And that was one place they used to have right off, I think it was Westchester. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, you got Don Shula, Kimbo Camper. I'm just giving you some food for thought, pun intended, stuff like that. But yeah, so I think there's opportunity in South Florida.
We had a goalie. You guys remember this guy, of course, Eddie Giacomin. And Eddie Giacomin, after his Detroit career, stayed in Detroit. And like Scott says, he opened up a restaurant in Detroit, Eddie Giacomin. So, yeah, that's not a lot of guys are doing that, it sounds like, down there in South Florida. Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry. South Florida, you know what? We can always kid around with South Florida because their fans are a little on the fickle side, when they don't support. But let me tell you, there's one thing about this market they do take care of in their own interesting way. Their sports heroes aren't forgotten. And you know what? Another one I should mention, even though, is Offerdahl's. John Offerdahl as well, the guy out of, I think it was out of one of the he wasn't Michigan State. I want to say Central Michigan or Western, one of those other ones up there. But John Offerdahl is a pretty good restaurant as well. So you get in the restaurant business. And I'm telling you, I'm giving you some stuff, and I'm going to put you on the spot on one of these shows. Not this week because we got to give you time to work on it, okay? But maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks down the road, and you can put that in your column, and then I'll know the guy paying attention to what I'm saying. One person with that said, I know Candy Ebling is paying attention to what I'm saying. But before I do that, okay, Joshua George says on Spit and Chicklets, he wants to get into management with the team. All right, well, we'll see. Is that what his name? Spit and Chicklets? I have no idea what that is. But we'll put it up there because it seems like it's a pretty decent chase. D. Lowe says, it's good to see you back in the piano room. All right. And Joshua George, I'm not sure how to really read this one. Have to ping her a little. You know what? We're gonna kid around, but we're not elaborating on this one. Okay, we're not talking about Tarasenko to the Panthers at the deadline because D-Lowe's is a smarter one of the group anyway. Joshua, trying to set Scott off with that question? No, you won't set me off with it because you know where we stand. But Joshua, going to at least say I ignored your stuff. I put it up there even though we kind of casted it off to the side. But the one thing we will not cast off to the side is the station break and Emily can do right now.
Good evening, everybody. You are listening to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. If you see that red subscribe button, hit it, like us, share us with all your friends, family, anybody that you know would love to hear any of the different topics we have on our channel. Monday nights on Fire Up Florida, we talk hockey. Then we talk baseball on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. Tuesday night, we talked football on Inside the Pigskin. Wednesday night, Sports Exchange. You never know what sports topics we'll be having on there. And then there's Thursday, we run up the lineup with Fire Up. And that, anything can happen. You just never know. Wherever you get your podcast, you can listen to us respectively the same days, whatever you'd like. We have a link on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where you can read all three of these fine gentlemen who write very eloquently, and they all write about different topics, so it's really cool. Go to our website, check out their columns. I take pictures because I'm behind the scenes, just like right now I'm kind of behind the scenes. And we have a link to our sports merchandise as well, where you can get a cool hat or a cool sweatshirt. One last thing, the South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book of Mr. Morganroth's. It is Lessons from the Microphone, tuning into the enduring wisdom of visionary leaders. Scott wrote the book. George wrote the foreword. Go get it. Amazon, Kindle, Barnes and Noble. Last but not least, if you want to sponsor this show or any of our shows or advertise, I'll gladly read your advertising. Call Scott 954-304-4941. If you missed any of it, it's scrolling on the bottom, or hit rewind, and I'll be back later to give you more it again. Thanks, guys. Back to the program.
All right, so we're on the superstar theme, right? Well, we're going to go ahead and stay with it. Connor McDavid is within reach of the 1,000-point mark. He has 982 in 645 games. My goodness. Okay. And to me, that's just unbelievable, and he can become the 5th player in NHL history to record 1,000 points in fewer than 700 games, following Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Mike Bossy, and Peter Stastny. All right, Mr. Peterson. Connor McDavid could go out there and put himself in some elusive company at the rate he's going. Who knows if this guy will blow this mark away before the All-Star break. Take it from there, Rod.
Well, you know what? What a fantastic topic to carry the next 30 minutes. I know it won't, but he has not won a Stanley Cup. I was like praying you wouldn't ask me to name one of the others that have accomplished that feat. Gretzky, yes. I might have got Lemieux. I wouldn't have got Bossy,
right,
and I wouldn't have got Peter Stastny. And Stastny does not have a cup in that group, correct, guys? Bossy's got 4.
Right.
Lemieux has 2. Gretzky has 4. Connor McDavid has none. So, yes, I get it.
Wow, but at least he didn't get it against the Panthers. But, I mean, you can't tell me you're not rooting for him to get one at some point as long as they're not against the Panthers.
Oh, yeah, no, I want it. But the question is, it goes back to that Mount Rushmore discussion that, hey, listen, you guys live close enough to Canada, or at least George does now. They're still talking about that Mount Rushmore debate we had 2 weeks ago. My friends, who's the 4th face on that mountain? And until you win a Stanley Cup, you brought up Marino earlier. Listen, Greg Cote called McDavid overrated in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I'll say it here. I didn't want to put it in the column in the South Florida Tribune because so many people read it. There were Panthers people that weren't happy at Greg Cote for saying McDavid was overrated because they thought in a tight series like that, just enough to give him a turbo boost of motivation, right? And was not a good thing to be said. But then the series ends, McDavid doesn't win, and we're sitting there going, Cote, he's not right by saying McDavid's overrated, but he's still never won. And guys, he's got to, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I've read Greg Cote for a while, and I met him a long time ago. I'm familiar with the guy in the market. Okay, Greg, you got that one wrong. And yes, you did go ahead and probably became bulletin board material. So the guy that probably thanks you for it is Paul Maurice. Okay, they ended up winning, and Connor McDavid will get his eventually. I remember going back to Larry Bird, Magic Johnson when they came out simultaneously and carried the NBA to the next ages. You knew they were going to face off in the finals, and there was a pun intended there because it is a hockey show. Okay, and but when you think about it, I mean, Bird, Magic got their rings anyway, so Connor McDavid will get his. I mean, you can write about it anytime you want in the South Florida Tribune, anytime you want. You're not cursing it because you can't blow it with the Panthers. They got their cup. Nobody can take it away from them. It's not like the Houston Astros where, we want to put an asterisk next to all the cheating scandal. I'm not going to get that conversation totally started. But it was a legitimate cup. They won it. And they had to go all 6. They ended up having some very tough series, which I'm going to lead to another topic and segue in a moment. But when you think of it, Cody was wrong. And you don't want to go out there. And Connor McDavid came back with vengeance. But in Game 7, when they needed it the most, Florida wanted it a little bit more than Florida. I mean, Florida wanted it more, and that's how they ended up winning it. And Paul Maurice, probably a bit better than I am, pretty good psychologist, and that's why they went with a veteran coach to begin with, because he's able to seed off a lot of that. So, George, what are your thoughts?
Well, Connor McDavid he's like a generational player. He definitely is at a disadvantage. I mean, this horrible streak that the Maple Leafs are on, it's just incredible. It's one of the worst streaks in sports right now. And I feel sorry for the guy. I really do, because they have built a team around him, and he's been just a tremendous athlete, great player. I'm sure a great teammate in the locker room. And you just hope he doesn't fall into that infamous category, like we talked about earlier, of never being able to win a cup or whatever sport it is. Ernie Banks comes to mind. Mr. Cub never won in the World Series. And the list goes on and on and on. But the thing is that he's young enough. And you're right, Scott. He is going to break that. He's going to join that elite group sooner rather than later with his total points. But this guy really needs to win. And so does Toronto. I mean, whether you like them or not, they're one of the original six. They're an institutional team, just like Montreal is in Canada. And I really hope that he gets one. If he doesn't, though, he should keep his options open for going somewhere else. It happens all the time in sports. We hate to see it happen a lot of times, but he has to keep his options open to go.
Yeah, good point. I'm glad it was interesting, Rod. He does bring up the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think the last time they won it was at 67, 68, been in the late 60s. Montreal won it. Montreal won it, what was it, 93? And the Canadian drought has gone in excess for a few decades now. But I don't think Connor McDavid's going to fall into that trap. I really don't. He got to sometimes what happens with great athletes is, we get so close and we taste it and then what happens the next year. Now, the only question that you have in Edmonton, and you know what, you being a Saskatchewan guy and myself not, okay, will the Edmonton Oilers, Rod, be able to go out there and surround him with the players so he doesn't become a Dan Marino? That's a big question I'm going to hit with you. Let me just, one last thing I want to mention is this thing I talked about here. He's going to get that 1,000 points, I predict, by the All-Star break. Go ahead, take over, Ryan.
I would probably have it by Halloween.
Yeah, right.
So it was like 18 points shy, right? Didn't you say 982?
Well, let me look at those numbers again. Yeah, 982 is right. Yeah, only 18. Yeah. So I think Halloween's more realistic than the All-Star break. God, barring injury.
I love the discussion that we have on this show, the three of us, on like roster construction and just the way the Oilers are doing it. They're paying McDavid big money. They're paying Leon Draisaitl more money. Draisaitl just signed the extension a couple of weeks ago. So they're putting the eggs in two baskets. Whereas we talked about Sidney Crosby taking less money in Pittsburgh to distribute more money around. Just a different way of doing it. Now, somebody, since I've come back to Florida within the last month, said, does it mean as much now to win a Stanley Cup as it used to? And I'm like, it's haunted me ever since I heard it. Because it's like, it should mean more now. You know what? It should mean more because it's harder to do. When we talk about Marcel Dion, he never won. He is the Marino of hockey. I think you guys would agree. Yeah. But it's like
comparison.
Right. But in the 80s, there was 21 teams. Now there's 32. Soon, apparently, to be 34 is what they're talking about. So you're saying, will the Oilers win a Stanley Cup and do the things to get him a cup? Boys, there's no guarantee. He'll play probably 10 more years. At least he's 28. Sid just signed a new deal and he's 37. So let's just say he's got 10 to 12 years to win that elusive cup. I don't know. I'm with George. He's probably going to have to win it elsewhere.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you know what? That makes three of us. Unless Stan Bowman's got a miracle. Unless Stan Bowman's got something going up his bag of tricks we don't know nothing about, but we'll address that in future shows. And I'm glad, Rod, that you mentioned the expansion. Please remind me later in the three-way chat that we have, going on amongst the three of us, to incorporate that pretty soon, because I think that's something that's we'll talk about tonight. I wanted to focus the efforts on the Panthers training camp as well as some of these other topics that are interrelated. And speaking of interrelated, now I'm going to segue over to the next one, and that's this. Okay, the Panthers are familiar with this guy. Okay, he was part of the road to get to the Stanley Cup. New York Rangers goaltender Igor Shesterkin won't negotiate an extension with the team during the regular season. He's in the last year of a 4-year contract, which carries an annual cap hit of $5.66 million. The Moscow native leads the NHL in wins, okay, with 109, save percentage at 921, and won the Vezina Trophy in 2022. So I have a question for both of you, okay? Is it a mistake by the Rangers who have not reached a deal thus far? Rod, go ahead.
Well, the way you read that, you said Shesterkin would not negotiate during the season.
That's right.
I'd like to think that they tried. You know, listen, it was funny because last night at the Panthers game, I was sitting beside a guy in the same row. We were talking about the best goalies in the NHL. And he just goes, he said Spencer Knight, who was in the goal at the time, he's like, he's an NHL caliber starting goalie. And I said, yes, but he ain't going to play ahead of Bob, Sergei Bobrovsky. And I said, you know, who do you think are the best goalies in the NHL? And this guy knew his stuff. He had a New York accent. He goes, Shesterkin, Bobrovsky, Vasilevsky. 3 Russians. I was just talking with Serena about it today. How good Shesterkin is. He was a Vezina winner 2 years ago, as you said, finalist last year. I don't think he's going anywhere. I really don't. When you're top 3 goalie in the National Hockey League every year, if they win a Stanley Cup, he's going to have a big part in it. Did they make a mistake? I'm sure they tried, but he's probably looking at the money going, the longer I wait, the more my price goes up. That would be my guess.
Fair. All right, George.
Well, he's 28 years old. Yeah, and he does have some leverage right there. You're absolutely right. Rod and Scott, he won 36 games this past season, 37 the year before, and 36 2 years ago, for crying out loud. I dare you to find somebody as consistent. I mean, this guy he's the real thing. He's the real thing. And you nailed it. He's going to go out and he doesn't want to be bothered during the season. I've heard this before, but heck, sometimes it works out better for the players and their agent because, like you said, he will be able to have a better chance at more money instead of rushing into it right now. But yeah, I admire him. I mean, he's a great goaltender. And like I said, look at this consistency. 36 wins, 37, 36. I mean, you can't get much better than that. But again, they haven't won a Stanley Cup. We heard that refrain earlier. So the Rangers obviously need to keep this guy. I agree there's other great goalies, but this guy, I really admire him. He's an all-star in my mind, and he's probably making a smart move money-wise, like you said, to hang out a little bit longer for that contract.
Well, the only reason I bothered to watch the Stanley Cup playoffs since the Wings weren't in it was because of the Panthers in the first place. But here's the kicker, okay? I paid close attention to the Boston series, but more so the Rangers. But Shesterkin was, to me, he was on his head making saves I couldn't believe a goaltender could make.
Yeah.
But here's is the bigger kicker. Find me a market that can pay you better than the metropolitan New York market. Do it. Because I'll tell you, the Rangers are stacked with money, a lot of it. The Yankees rarely ever lose players to money. And when they did, Robinson Cano, how was his career when it was over with? It went down. And I'm talking sinkhole style. It went down. He was never the same player because the New York team, to their credit, can go out there and surround you with supporting cast that have bigger TV deals anyways compared to anybody else in the United States or North America. So the Rangers will afford him. The question is, how much are they going to have to pay? Are they going to catch him when he's had a tough year, or are they going to catch him when he's depending on what his value? Another thing that nobody really foresees is what about what all the goaltenders are being paid, and he may want to go out there and see what the market is based on the other goaltenders. So there's a variety of factors. The reality is he's not leaving New York, and if he plays it out, maybe Bobrovsky may want to go ahead and retire, and who knows, maybe Bill Zito will reach into his checkbook. Is that a far-fetched possibility? I don't know. But when he brought Bobrovsky here from Columbus, how did that work out? Maybe at the beginning it wasn't working out as good, but now nobody's going to blame the results, because the only thing for Sergei Bobrovsky is you might as well wait for your jersey to get retired with Roberto Luongo, because that's what's going to happen to him anyways. But nobody outbids the Rangers. In fact, nobody whatsoever outbids, a New York team, unless the guys really want to leave the area because the money's there. And let's not lose sight of the fact that in the metropolitan New York area, the taxes are quite high, and not lose sight of the fact in Florida, there is no state income tax too. So just putting it all out there. But Shesterkin's going to make a lot of money no matter how this all plays out.
Yeah. How much do you need, right? But it's funny because there's some interesting things happening in sports. Sergei Bobrovsky turned 36 this week. He signed here in 2020 for $10.5 million, which was, you guys remember that, it was the first day of free agency.
Right.
And I've talked to Dale Talon about it. I've had him on my Cats and Bolts podcast. He said he would do it again. The only reason Bob struggled at the start was because of the pressure on him. It was all mental. I mean, he was the highest paid NHL goalie of all time. He struggled with it. But again, he's put a banner in the rafters. His jersey's going in the rafters. But consider this. Players are playing longer than ever. Again, he's 36. Marc-Andre Fleury's 38 this year. Tom Brady played to 45 in football. You look at these young kids coming in on their first contracts in any league. CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson in the NFL are all the best receivers in the NFL. They're in their first contract. Connor Bedard probably could have played in the NHL at 17. He came in at 18. So they're coming in ready, younger, and they're staying longer. What that means, I don't know. I can only think it comes down to training and recovery time and that kind of thing. And the only reason that popped into my head is Shesterkin's in the prime of his career,
right?
But he's going to play for a long time. So he's made a lot of money. He's going to make a lot of money.
Yep.
And let me tell you, when you went into Big Apple, your accomplishments are definitely recognized in a much bigger stage. I mean, you went in New York, you're revered there. You went anywhere, you're revered, but let alone in the #1 media market in the country. You really do.
Yep.
And I don't know, I won't put LA in that category because LA and New York are very different media markets. But you went in New York, these people are passionate. And they're not afraid to tell you how they feel good and bad. But that's just the type of sports town that it really is. It's nothing against the market itself. So, but we'll see. It'll be interesting. But I tell you one thing, when I saw him in the playoffs against the Panthers, you know, I was impressed. I really was. And you know what, Ron, you are right. Let's face reality. Winning the cup is way harder with 16 wins, let alone 8. Remember, I've never seen an octopus with 16 legs, only with 8. So, and if you can find me one of those, we're all going to get rich. George will get rich with his other half. Ron's going to get rich with his other half. Serena, what a sweetheart she is, anyways. And me, well, you can't complain about Candy. She's a Rolls Royce of women. You know, she does it all. But giving a little prompts out to the others, yeah, apologize for nothing. It is what it is. But this is Fire Up Florida. My name is Scott Morgan, Rough Motor City Madmouth. Without his clipboard, but definitely kept his sense of humor. But we will get that clipboard back, I hope. If not, I can buy another clipboard, and it don't matter. I just make sure I do what Rodney says. Take pictures of the notes so you don't have nothing to worry about. I learned something here about that. But then again, how often you get invited on shows after the game? Well, it is what it is. But if you want to see the show again, go back to South Florida Tribune YouTube channel and subscribe. You can see Rodney and myself. Don't want to take away from Candy's thunder, but before I do so, Rod, and put Candy back on. Okay, you're going to let everybody know how they get a hold of you and tell us a bit more about the Cats and Bolts podcast. Go ahead, Rod.
I appreciate that, man. This week is our 4th episode of season 2. And last week, Jeff DeForest dropped in, the legendary Miami sportscaster, just happened to be in the studio, and we yanked him on the air, and he talked about what it meant for the Panthers to win the Stanley Cup after 30 years here. We're hoping to have Bill Lindsay this week. So it's Cats and Bolts. Search it on YouTube or my Twitter. You can find it there, Cats and Bolts podcast, where we cover the Panthers and the Florida Lightning. Thank you, Scott.
You're very welcome, Rod. Jeff DeForest has been a very dear friend of mine since the 80s. Well, you talk about one of the classiest guys in the South Florida market. Yeah, Rod, I do have a history in this market. You know, I've been all over the place. You know, you've been all over Canada, all over Florida. Just kidding with you. I don't know where you've been. But Jeff DeForest is one of the classiest people I've ever met. And I am working on some collaboration here to get you and I and Jeff DeForest and George on the show. I just have to make sure that my schedule lightens up a little because as you folks know, following us here at South Florida Tribune, we do travel a lot. We cover a lot of football, and we also do a lot with the Marlins. So we get around. You know, we try to make sure that we spread out a little bit. You know, and we're not one of those specialty things. We treat ourselves like a newspaper. Okay, there's a lot of different sections that you have an opportunity to read. Only we try to not make it just written, but as well as with the content that we produce. But what good stuff, Ron. And I hope that you continue to grow the Cats and Bolts podcast. And I know the Florida Panthers will definitely be appreciative of the coverage that you give them. They should be. They ought to be thankful they got a guy like you working diligently to promote them. And we feel very fortunate that we've partnered up with Cats and Bolts, you and Serena, to try to help grow your platform, in addition to making it the ultimate win-win situation for both sides. And don't kid yourself, folks. there will be a time when I come out of the man cave that I get out there and surprise Rod. You can yank me and tell me anything you want before and after how good, bad I am, and I'll stand there and take it and still keep talking. And I'll just make sure you need earplugs before it's over with. So don't worry about it. I will get up there before it's all said and done. All right. So whatever. It is what it is. If I rambled, so what? There used to be a movie called Rambo, but I'm rambling. Okay. But that said, get that. Don't worry about it. Think about it. George Eichhorn, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, they can follow me on the South Florida Tribune. I run right under the Motor City Tribune heading. At the end of my column is a link to purchase my book, which came out several years back, called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. And Rod and Scott, you remember these names, don't you? Bud Lynch, Bruce Martin, and now we're blessed with Ken Kal and Ken Daniels. Great broadcast hockey history in Detroit. And there's also Dave Strader. How can I overlook David? I'm sorry, the late Dave Strader. Great job working for the Red Wings and Adirondack before that, I believe. So there's a link to my book. You can find me at Yahoo, at gicorn@yahoo.com, on Twitter or X at SandG Sports, just like it sounds, 99. You can follow me on Instagram also, and follow me here on this great show, Fire Up Florida. We got the 108 Stitches. I'm part of the Sports Exchange. It's been a real fun ride for a guy I've worked with and next to for almost 45 years, Mr. Scott. He's in the book too.
Thank you, George. Also, I should point out, Dave Strader actually spent a year with the Florida Panthers as their broadcaster. I don't know if you knew that, Ron.
No, I forgot that.
Yeah, he was here, I think, for 1 year. But Dave Strader is well known for not only what he did with the Red Wings, but he was a big national force as well.
Yes.
So unfortunately for Dave, he passed away of cancer. But I actually met him with him, and who's the other guy from Little Caesars? So we spent time with him downtown when I was taking a job in North Carolina in the sales, and it was unbelievable. But Dave Strader, actually, look it up, folks, actually served as a broadcaster for the Florida Panthers. I'm not going to sit here and beat my head up over what the arena was called back then, because it doesn't matter. But he did serve as a voice for the Florida Panthers. So that's it. Candy, take over.
If you see the little book up in the corner here, that's the book that George wrote. There's a picture of it up there. And then if you want another great read, you gotta go get Scott's book. Both of them are
look how big his book is compared to mine.
Yeah, but this way I can have both of them up on the screen at the same time, George.
No, you're doing fine, Candy.
Scott wrote Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning in the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. And George wrote the foreword in that book too. So you gotta go get both the books. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Apple and Google Books. It's also, there's a link on our website to both the books, www.floridatribune.com. You can also go purchase any kind of merchandise, go see the great content that all three of these fine gentlemen have submitted and are up on our website. I take pictures. I'm more behind the scenes, but I do have to say thank you, Scott, for the compliment. Rolls Royce, I'll take it. I appreciate that. And if you want to get a podcast, go get ours, South Florida Tribune, wherever you get your podcast. Monday nights we talk hockey, and then later we talk baseball. Tuesday nights we talk football. Wednesday nights and Thursday nights, you never know what topics we're going to have. Typically Thursday nights we're going against the NFL, so a lot of times we give you updates so you're not missing anything. So tune into us on Fire Up. Wednesday nights is Sports Exchange, where you just never know what we might be talking. We've talked about hot dog eating contests. We've talking about NBA. We've talked MLB. You know, especially with the MLB season winding down, catch the show next, because that's going to talk about baseball and where we're headed. You can also catch Scott does one-on-one interviews, and lately he's been doing a show with George on nofilter.net called the Motor City Mad Mall Show. Typically that's Wednesday night. Plus on our YouTube channel, if you have not subscribed, please do so. If you like Hurricanes football, you can hear from all of the Hurricanes press conferences after their games, including and I don't know if I should really be saying this out loud, but right now I would say he is a Heisman candidate. Cam Ward is up on our channel, so go see what comments he's been saying after each of the shows. And his coach, Mario Cristobal, who thinks the world of him because he's just playing lights out. Go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, get updates. We put updates all these shows and then all the press conferences from the Miami Hurricanes football team after their games, their press conferences. If you'd like to advertise or sponsor a show, call Scott, 954-304-4941. Don't miss an opportunity for me to be reading your ad out loud. Back to you, Scott.
All right, Rod and George, and especially you, Rod. One thing you might want to add to the Cats and Bolts podcast, I'm going to mention it right now. For those individuals involved in the chat room that are from your platform or mine, if you want to go ahead and be a guest with us on the air, feel free to participate in the chat room. I will be more than happy to bring on special guests coming from our subscribers. We have a great thing going in the chat room, and that applies not only to this show, but every show that we have. So go out there, Rod, please pass the word to Cats and Bolts. If they want to sit there and they talk to you and they know what they're talking about and I see them, I will be more than happy to bring some hidden gems on this show, just so you know. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground tonight. Our goal is to make these shows as entertaining and informing as we can. There's no question that George and I and Rod have done that tonight, and I'm really proud of both of these guys for the efforts that they have put in tonight, as well as the effort in the chat room. But with that said, okay, we're always looking to get better is what we're looking to do. 108 Stitches Baseball Talk will be on at around 9 o'clock Eastern time. So obviously we have a lot of things to go. The show is going to be evolving and changing a lot. So, you know, right when you think we have one format, I'm going to find ways to keep it interesting and real. And that's exactly what we're striving for. So, Rod, nice job. Okay, look at this show because you can frame this one. Okay, Rod, and all the other ones that we're going to, not that the other shows were, but this is one of the most detailed shows we've had. And my goal is to keep them as detailed because our fans deserve that type of detailed information to make it worth a watch, considering all the competition there is out here to do these types of shows. And I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to comment, and we'll do everything we can to bring them on the show. So once again, great job to my crew, George Eichhorn, Rod Peterson. Okay, with an N next time, not Sam, S-E-M. And when he looks at it, I like to kid around with Rod because he's the nicest guy on the planet. No big deal. But Rod does have one homework assignment before we leave tonight, that he has to go in that book, whether he reads or not, and take a look at that Gordie Howe picture in there with me in a sling. I know that it's going to be hard for you to let your fingers do the walking and look at Gordie Howe with me with one wing instead of a bunch of them. So, and no, I'm not going to go out there and sing because otherwise I'll be breaking some Memorex classes. Don't think that. I'm not one of those, not American Idol, none of that business. I am what I am. Draw your own conclusion. So with that said, we'll see you next week, same time and same place on Fire Up Florida. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we will catch you the next time. Good night, everybody. Have a great hockey week.